Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and BaltimorePositive.com. Come on out and visit us here this week. We got a heck of a football celebration, really. We have a chance to do something here in Baltimore we haven't done in 53 years. An AFC Championship game. Houston Texans coming to town this week. We're talking a lot of football around here. Want to remind everyone we have suspended the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. I know I am wearing my Pappas world famous crab cake shirt, now open in Bel Air. We are doing Crab Cake Row the week of February 5th. We will have Maryland Lottery. I have a few O-snaps, a few peppermint payouts still left. I gave some of these away at the Hollywood Casino. I gave a lot of them away at Hollywood Casino on Saturday night, watching Joe Flacco get steamrolled and watching poor Tua Tagovailoa realize he was no longer in Hawaii anymore. Our friends at Window Nation, in conjunction with Jiffy Lube and the Maryland Lottery, putting us on the road. We're doing the biggest charity week we've ever done for the Maryland Food Bank. It's going to be the week of February 5th. We're calling it Crab Cake Row, a cup of soup or bowl. We're going to be offering free soup for folks that come out and do good things in the community. I'm wearing my Pappas shirt. We're going to be there on the Friday before the Super Bowl. That is February the 9th. February 5th, we're going to start the party at Fadley's down at Lexington Market on the 6th. On Tuesday, we'll be at Costas. Wednesday, we'll be at Coco's in Lauraville. Thursday, we will be at State Fair in Catonsville. And on Friday, we're going to be at the aforementioned Pappas in Cockeysville. I need big locations, Luke. And the reason for that is, I don't know if you know, they might be in the Super Bowl, and you might be in Las Vegas running around on a junket at the M Casino with JT the Brick rolling dice. We're not that far off, and here we go. And it feels like it's been a little while since they played meaningful football. We sat around all night Saturday, all night Sunday, all night Monday, which felt like a Sunday. Then it snowed on Monday, and Tuesday felt like a Monday, then it snowed. So this thing's hopping up on us. It's going to be cold as hell on Saturday. Texans aren't going to travel well. I don't want to say it remains to be seen if the stadium's full. I think it'll be full. I think the people that thought they were going to scalp their tickets, Bill Cole and I did a whole segment last week on that from Cole Roofing about, hey, I'm going to get rich on my tickets. No, you're not. It's going to be 20 degrees, and you're going to be lucky that folks want to go out there and sit in it. And I think for all of us to sit and watch cold people over the weekend, and it's going to be cold here all week, weather's going to be a factor in this one. But, over the weekend, what happened with Buffalo and Pittsburgh and moving games and all of that, it's been an interesting tournament and a bunch of really bad football over the weekend. This is the weekend where things usually shake out and we get better matchups.
You certainly hope so, because that was not a very compelling weekend other than the weather elements in Kansas City. And then, of course, in Buffalo, as you alluded to, with the postponement from Sunday to Monday. I mean, 5 out of 6 games were decided by multiple scores. And, a couple of those games, okay, Pittsburgh lost by 2 touchdowns. Did it ever really feel like the Steelers were really in that football game? I guess maybe right after the blocked field goal. But beyond that, I mean, Buffalo was in control. I said to you, the only way the Bills would lose that game would be if the Bills play with their food a little bit too much, as they are apt to do, which is one of the reasons why they were 6-6 at one point. But they, for the most part, took care of the football and they took care of business. But, you look at these matchups, I mean, beginning with, we've talked about Houston, but just the dismantling of the Browns. And as much as the focus was on Joe Flacco and he threw the 2 pick sixes, and look, Joe didn't play well. I mean, there's no way to mince words about that, but they torched the Browns pass defense, which was supposed to be so good and had been so good over the course of the year. And that ended up being such a lopsided affair. I wasn't really surprised what happened with Kansas City against Miami. I mean, I've said it for a few weeks now. The Dolphins, for as much as they have talent and some special players on offense, the injuries on defense really caught up to them. Huge, big time over the last few weeks.
Well, I thought that about Chubb, and I thought that about T.J. Watt. I'm thinking their defense is big. I mean, could we lose Roquan Smith this week and still win the Super Bowl? Maybe. I don't know. Depends on who the matchup is. Probably change things about Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce next week, or Josh Allen, or whatever you're going to see. But when you lose Chubb, I thought that about the Steelers. I thought this might have been a fair fight on a cold night if they had their full complement of players, in that they make a mistake, force a fumble, Allen throws the ball around a little bit. The weather wasn't going to be good to begin with. It's going to be cold. But you can't win without T.J. Watt. You can't win without Bradley Chubb. You can't win without Lamar Jackson, as we found last year. You don't win without your best players in January. I mean, your best guy's got to be on the field.
Yeah, and I'd even add to that, and this is why I didn't give Pittsburgh, even with TJ Watt, wasn't giving them much of a chance. You can't win without good quarterback play. And I mean, Mason Rudolph was a nice story, but limitations are evident. I think that's obvious. And even in the case of Tua Tagovailoa, for all the statistics he put up, look, he had a chance to solidify his spot, so to speak, in terms of the quarterback hierarchy in the AFC, and not just the AFC, but the NFL. And look at how he played. He didn't play well against the Ravens after the first 20 minutes or so. Did not play very good football. Did not play well against Buffalo, and was completely overmatched in Kansas City. And I get it; it was cold, but it was cold for the Chiefs too, and they couldn't do it. So I think you're right. The injuries are so key, and I think for Miami, if they had been fully healthy, would I have given them a better chance against Kansas City? Sure. But at the same time, Miami proved over and over and over again this year, whenever they went up against a good team, they weren't ready. They had one win all year against a team with a winning record, and it was the Cowboys. And we saw how that played out for the Cowboys hosting Green Bay on Sunday, which I mean, how about Jordan Love? I mean, what a story that has turned out to be. We've talked about CJ Stroud and what he's done in the AFC as a rookie, but Jordan Love, not a rookie, but his first year as a starter, it looks very Aaron Rodgers replacing Brett Favre-esque. I mean, he looks like he can really play, and it took him a little while. It took him about half a season to really get his bearings, but he's been one of the better quarterbacks in the NFC, for the better part of about two months now. I mean, go look at his numbers from about week 10 on, week 11 on. I mean, really, really impressive, and overcoming what is a flawed roster, not a very good Green Bay defense. So, I think this weekend really, it illuminated just how important quarterback play is again. And not that anyone needed a reminder. We know that in this day and age, but between that and then just seeing some of these teams that were a little more banged up, you kind of saw that exposed as well. But, by and large, was not the best weekend of football in terms of these matchups. I mean, Lions Rams was great. That's the game I thought would be the game of the weekend. I thought that all along, and in fact, I thought the Rams would upset Detroit, and they came close to doing it. But Lions, good story, right? I mean, first playoff win since 1991. I mean, you think about all the guys on that team who were not even born yet, who contributed to that victory on Sunday night. That's a pretty good story, and I think, you look at the NFC now, the 49ers, it's a similar message for them as it is with the Ravens, with the Texans. Don't sleep on the Packers just because they're the 7 seed. But, if you look at how that all sets up, it looks like it's a road to 49ers Lions in the NFC Championship game, which I think will be a really good matchup. But other than that Lions game, let's face it, it was a pretty lopsided weekend overall. I mean, a couple of these games were games for a little while, but for the most part, the haves and the have-nots were pretty evident over the course of the weekend.
I think about these wild card games, and I think about like weekends like when the Jaguars beat the Dolphins like 52-0, and like really awful blowout games. Boy, that Flacco game on Sunday, and whatever the Texans are and whatever they're going to be this week, they had that moment at home in a season where you don't think you're going to have it. The Lions, their fans had their party, right? Cowboys showed up, nothing happened. The Eagles, my God. I mean, there's some real steaming messes, even amongst playoff teams. Tomlin jumping off the podium when he's asked about his future, right? Like, you lose these games, home or away, playoffs. I mean, it's one thing to be the Carolina Panthers or to be the Bengals where your quarterback gets hurt. And I had Solomon Wilcots on this week, or even the Jaguars who sort of spit it up at the end of the year. I had Sam Cavaris on last week, who votes for the Hall of Fame, trying to get Fred Taylor into the Hall of Fame now, and a Baltimore guy, Woodlawn guy. So I've gone around the league and sort of, licking the wounds of, we didn't make the playoffs. We were expected to, Cincinnati, Jacksonville, right? Or we're a mess, New England, the Jets. I mean, if you didn't make the playoffs and you won 5 or 6 games, you're a mess. You don't have a quarterback, you're a mess. You fired your coach, you're a mess. Your fans are pissed off and nobody wants to come to the games, you're a mess. So But then I see that they all got $380 million of television money, and I realize why guys like Chad Steele throw me out and why they don't care whether anybody comes to the game this week or whether they even plow their own stadium when they've sold tickets for $500 a piece, and whether you have a place to stand and what time the game starts and what they're going to do. You know, like, they are what they are. Peacock. One word, Peacock. Well, actually, two words, Hollywood Casino, because that's where I went to watch the game instead of getting Peacock. But, you know, all of the league's excess, greed, fandom, gambling, flags, bad officiating. It's all sitting here. You know what I mean? Dude, what the hell else was I doing over the weekend? I sat here like everybody else, and I watched 10 hours of football Saturday, 10 hours of football Sunday, 10 hours of football on Monday. Man, I watched 30 hours of football over the weekend, and I see it in all of it, and all of it's coming through here this week. And we were kind of had the weekend off, and it's going to snow and get the plows out. And let's watch the snow cam in Orchard Park and all that. Now it comes here, and it gets real heavy if you're losing 10-0, as we found out. For the 49ers as well, and I would even go into Sunday, where I think Sunday night, look, I think the Ravens will win. They're 10-point favorites. I expect that at 8 o'clock. I'm sitting around here watching Brock Purdy dirty and, you know, having a good time and watching Jordan Love, and we'll see how it goes out in Santa Clara on Saturday night. But I'm thinking, give me the popcorn like Michael Jackson. We're going to sit here all Sunday night, and we're going to watch these heavyweights go at each other, and knowing that we only have to get one of them. And, man, as far as the road paved to gold, if I'm writing Purple Rain 3, and I'm not, but you can, Luke, I got some Purple Rain 2s and 1s in the trunk if you want them, by the way. I would say that it's dreamy. I mean, even Andrew's coming back. What's going on with this team is they believe, dare I say, destiny, right? I mean, somebody out there it might be Houston. It might be, probably not, because it usually isn't rookie coach, rookie quarterback or whatever, but there's some good stories being authored, including Jared Goff in Detroit. But San Francisco and the Ravens had the week off. Nobody talked about them. We've seen all the rest of these stories over the week, including Tampa. Baker Mayfield won a playoff game. He's a 1-1 overall. He's not a joke, right? And I think we saw, if you don't believe in Detroit, maybe you believe in Tampa, right? But this is going to be an interesting weekend of football, and it never goes to script. And I know we want the script to be Mark Andrews comes back and there's a parade here on Valentine's Day, and Lamar believe that, and all. Maybe that's the way it is, but maybe this is Josh Allen's time, right? Or maybe it's Patrick Mahomes doing it on the road for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, you just said it. It doesn't necessarily go to script. I mean, that's why we watch, right? I mean, as much as guys like me enjoy and appreciate analytics and DVOA, and we all sit there and argue about power rankings, even though we all
doesn't matter when you fumble.
Right. Well, we all say we hate power rankings, but we look at them over the course of the year. But you get to these games. I mean, it's a 1-game season from here on out. It really is. I mean, we can sit here and talk. You just said it. I mean, we're working under the assumption that the Ravens will handle their business on Saturday. I expect them to. I'm going to pick them to win. Going out on a big limb there, right? Picking the best team in the NFL. But yeah, you do look in the opposite side of this AFC bracket, and it is fascinating from the standpoint of you have Kansas City, Buffalo, and the Ravens know that, okay, they're not going to have to play both of them on their path to a Super Bowl, but they're going to have to play one of them, if assuming they win and beat the Texans on Saturday. And it is interesting from the standpoint of as much as we've talked about the Ravens and their path, and you just said it, on paper, it doesn't get much better than this, right? Kansas City down. Buffalo had to win, 6 in a row just to get to this point. That's how little their margin for error was. Cincinnati is sitting at home because Joe Burrow hurt his wrist in mid-November. I mean, go down the list. Miami wasn't ready for prime time. Joe Flacco turned back into a pumpkin. I mean, go down the list of all these teams. But on the flip side, you have Buffalo, who is looking at Kansas City in the same way that the Ravens are right now. And they, more so than the Ravens, they faced Kansas City in the playoffs a couple times in recent years, and they've fallen short. They had the gone in 13 seconds a few years ago, and they lost to them. So they've been in that position, but they're looking at it and saying, we're finally playing Kansas City in our building. And yeah, Patrick Mahomes and that offense isn't as explosive as it's been in recent years. But And I've said this to anyone who would listen. And look, there are other people. I'm not the only one. But for as much as people have been quick to be dismissive of the Chiefs, it's still Andy Reid. It's still Patrick Mahomes. And by the way, it is a much better defense than Kansas City has had in recent years. So as much as the focus for the Ravens is on Houston this week, but for fans, because fans and media, we can look ahead because we're not playing. But you do look at that, and the other side of the bracket, that's interesting in terms of that dynamic with both Buffalo and Kansas City. And Kansas City, I mean, I just think back to all the years we would talk about Brady and Belichick, and it's finally over, and they're not that good, and they can't do this or they can't do that, or they're really injured. And then how many times did you see them back in the AFC Championship or back in the Super Bowl when we're talking about them again on Radio Row all those years? So,
but there's not many years when you're the one and the two and the three are a 1A and a 1B, and they have to go play each other. And anytime that happens, if you could avoid that conflict, you win. When you get Ben Roethlisberger and Peyton Manning going against each other, if you're Tom Brady, you only get one of them. And this is that year. And that's why I keep saying you better win. You better win. You better win. You better win. And I'm going to be a prick about that. You better win. Because I've sat here and watched the Orioles win 101 games and not get out of their way in October and then just think you're going to win 102 next year. I don't say it never happens. It's a 10% chance that last year is a stepping stone to next year when last year was a 1 seed. Like literally. When last year was a 1 seed, if you think in this year you're going to be a 1 seed with a bullet, man, that's Yankee stuff. That's not reality. I mean, the Colts did it for a while. The Patriots did it for a while. A couple of those elite teams. We've never had that around here. Maybe Lamar is that. And maybe they're going to draft well enough and they have enough young players they can control their cap. Maybe they really can win 13 games 2 out of the next 3 years. Maybe they can. But somebody else might win 14. And it might be C.J. Stroud. It might be Trevor Lawrence getting the defense. It could be anything. But people getting in the way and where Allen is perceived to be and where he's been playing lately, right? And we'll get to him fake sliding because I don't want to let that go. You and I got to talk about that. And Mahomes, to only get one or the other, C.J. Stroud aside as a rookie and a 10-point underdog this week on a cold day. Purple Rain 3, dude. I got this pen. See, I have these pens here. I do big pens. This one here actually has a purple in it. So I'm inking my Purple Rain right now for you. Purple Rain 3. This is how the book is written. I mean, everything's fairy tale so far for them, right to now.
Yeah, but I'd also point out to you, Purple Rain 1 and 2 did not constitute a number 1 seed and being the heavy favorite throughout. I mean, that right there shows how often it doesn't go to script. How often it isn't.
Yeah, this script has never been written in this way here.
Well, I think, I mean, just look at the history of the franchise. Now, of course, 2000, that was the first time they'd been in the playoffs. So you didn't really have, other than just saying that the Ravens hadn't won anything in their first 4 years, you didn't really have any kind of a redemptive story, through, from an on-field standpoint. But 2012, I mean, think about what had led up to that. I mean, you go all the way back to 2006 and the failure there. First time they had ever had a first-round bye and what happened to them against Indianapolis and how that was very quickly, very rapidly, beginning of the end, however you want to classify it for Brian Billick and that era of the Ravens, right? But, obviously the Ravens in 2011, they had the first-round bye. They lost to New England, Billy Cundiff, Lee Evans. So 2012, they did have that redemptive story. So, the Ravens have been in this position before in terms of being the favorite, but, does this, this has been a 4-year story now for Lamar Jackson in this era of the Ravens after what happened in 2019. But, the 2012 team, they were 10-6. We all know what happened that December, right? So, it happens in different ways. So this is unique for the Ravens in the sense that, they haven't often been the team that you point to as being the hunted. They haven't been the team that's been the heavy favorite in the way that this team is in the AFC.
And they've never
right
made
now.
good on it in this era.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, I mean, the other times they've been the first round bye, look at how it's gone. 2006, 2011, they had a first round bye, which, by the way, Houston hosted Houston in the divisional round that year. And if you recall, that was a choppy effort. That was the game where Ed Reed made some not so flattering remarks about Joe Flacco the day, a couple days after that. And there was a controversy for 5 minutes about that. That was a little overblown, but at the time it was, made some headlines. But and then there's 2019, and we know how that turned out. So look, there's no requisite. It's not as though you need to be the number one seed, or as you mentioned with the Orioles, that you need to win 100 plus games to win the World Series. Far from it. The Texas Rangers proved that and reminded us of that this past year.
Even though in the middle of the season we all feel like we need to be number one in the power rankings,
Yeah.
What you need to do is have a home game, have healthy players, and have a good matchup, and not
and some
not,
luck.
And then go out and execute, do all the things that you've talked about doing. And the reason everyone I talked to last week, you can go through the full docket of all of these real. There wasn't anybody I had on the show last year that hasn't been doing this for 30 years. Like literally, Clark Judge, Sam Cavaris, Mike Flynn. I mean, the guests we had, all of them, there is a level of expectation because of how good this team has been.
Yeah.
DVOA. I had Aaron Schatz and Mike Taniero on last week talking DVOA and talking about historically that a team that has a lead at the 2-minute warning in every single game they play, and that could have closed it out in that way and been a perfect team in that way and didn't, that they have never rolled out of bed on the wrong side where there's any thought that they're going to be behind 13-3 at halftime this week, right? Like that's not conceivable because it hasn't happened yet, but it's conceivable when you get a punt blocked, you fumble, you throw a pick six, the ball squirts up in the air, you get a bad call, like all of those things that we saw happen over the weekend that conspired to blowouts everywhere. I don't expect that. Nobody expects that from the Ravens. And I think the other part that I get from everyone, and I don't know whether this is even legitimate or not, because they didn't play from behind at all year long. Like they just didn't. So, but the perception is they could if they needed to. And that's a totally different place than where they were against Tennessee or I guess the Chargers were still in San Diego. No, they were in LA. They were in where they are now, Purgatory, Harbaughville. But I would say for those games, trouble begat trouble, begat trouble, begat let's go on fourth down, let's not make it. They haven't played that way this year ever. It would be out of character. And if they were behind 13-3 at halftime on a 21-degree day because they had 3 turnovers and Tucker missed a field goal, whatever, they could come out and they could overcome being down 10 points.
Yeah, they can. That still doesn't mean you want to be in that position though, because of what you just said. Because
they haven't
then
been
you're
in that
talking
position. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, they trailed for a good portion of the Rams game. I think, you kind of look at that as being, and look, I mean, even that game, went to overtime. They won on a punt return for a touchdown. So, you kind of look at how the season has played out. You're right. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, but like I said, and I'll keep coming back to this, 2019 they hadn't lost since late September that season. It was week 4 when the Browns beat them, and might as well have been a different team at that point in time. They traded for, after that happened, they signed Josh Bynes and they signed LJ Fort and they traded for Marcus Peters, and we saw them reel off 12 wins in a row and look dominant in doing it. The point is, all it takes is one performance to be out of character. You wake up out on the wrong side of the bed. You come out a little overconfident. You come out, a little slow out of the gate because you haven't played a really meaningful game in 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. So, those are just the potential pitfalls. I think that's a big reason why John Harbaugh, they practiced all week. They practiced in pads on Friday, even though I don't think it was this over the top, hard hitting training camp like practice, but they did practice in pads. They went to the stadium on Saturday for an hour and a half practice. I think that was as much a mental and psychological thing for them as anything else, to kind of go through, hey, let's go to the stadium, let's practice, let's visualize being here a week from now, hosting Houston or whoever they thought it was going to be at that point in time. So you do those things, you try to avoid those pitfalls as much as you can, but still have to go out and play the game. And at this point in the season, Yeah, even talking about Green Bay, who barely got in, even talking about the Texans who needed to win in week 18 to win the division.
Well, look at
Even
where the
talking,
Bills are. The Bills are hosting a home game now this week
yeah,
that they have Mahomes coming in because they got their business done against Miami in the end because they were going to be the 7 seed. They were going to be out of the playoffs 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago. Now they're hosting a game, and if Houston pulls off a miracle, they can host an AFC Championship game if they win, right? And they'll be
yeah,
in a position to know that before the game starts on Saturday night as to whether they'd have a trip to Baltimore or Houston coming in, and that's what the stakes would be for them. But they were given up for dead. The Bills were given up for dead when the Eagles were 10-1 and the Cowboys were 9-2. And now look at it. Now look at it.
yeah, exactly. I mean that's why we always we joke about overreacting week 1 and week 2, right? Every year we talk about that, the overreaction in week 1 and week 2, but really that's a year-long thing. A week to we talk about it. It's a week-to-week league, but we always forget that it's a week-to-week league and how we assess and how we react to what happens. And that's why the Ravens, they're so highly regarded, because week to week they've continued to be the best team in the league, or one of the best teams in the league at any point over the course of the season. I guess, okay, no one thought they were the best team in the league when they lost to Pittsburgh back in week 5. As we were getting ready to watch the Orioles in game 2 of the division series, and they had that inexplicable loss in Pittsburgh. Other than that, and certainly since then, they've been the best team in the NFL, and they've been that consistent. But that has to carry over now. You have to continue that, and you have teams who everyone's good who's left. I mean, even Green Bay. Green Bay, you talk about them; they barely made it, right? 9-8, and they didn't look like a 9-8 team against the Cowboys. And look, the Cowboys are fraudulent as they are year after year after year, and they're probably going to undergo a bunch of changes, but they still were the number 2 seed.
It was that
Green
hex
Bay
we put on them when we went down there. You and I remember that little seance we had outside the locker room.
Yeah,
We didn't need to put a hex on the
so,
Cowboys. They were already hexed.
right. So, and I mean, you look at Tampa Bay. Even though I'm a little less inclined to compliment Tampa Bay too much, because the Eagles are just disastrous. Disaster. I mean, boy,
how does that unravel in 6 weeks that the coach is going to get fired? I mean, what? They were in the Super Bowl 48 weeks ago, 49 weeks ago.
They were regarded as the best team in the league through the first 10 or 11 weeks. I don't know how you look at that without concluding that there's some very serious stuff going on behind the scenes. And look, coaching, they lost both their coordinators. And I'm glad we shifted here, because I think this is another important point for the Ravens. As much as you've been saying for a while,
by the way, we should do a whole segment on where you're about to go for sure.
I think you look at where the Ravens are right now, and let's be clear. I don't want to be alarmist about this. If you have a healthy and upright Lamar Jackson year after year after year, it's been proven you have a chance. You have a heck of a chance anytime you play. We've seen that for 5 years now. That said, you have your defensive coordinator who's been interviewed by 5 or 6 teams at this point already.
He's Todd Monken interviewed, by the way, right? He's getting the job.
You would think so. Is it possible? Not this year, but he's going to get a job sooner than later. And it's
by the way, if you win the Super Bowl, that's when Monken's that's when they go out and lay 52 on Houston this week, right? And Nicole, like, all of this can unravel quickly too. I remember Marvin was going to get a job, and then he's back here coaching again, right? Like,
you never know.
You never know, right? Yeah.
But the point is, everything about this team moving forward now, coordinators, not just the coordinators, but I know even some unreported, some off the record, there's a lot of interest in their other assistant coaches, as there should be when you're talking about a team that's the best in the NFL and so highly regarded as far as their coaching staff. So it's not just potentially your coordinators, but losing some guys that could potentially be replacements for them down the line. You have that salary cap situation. While it's not the worst in the NFL, it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be easy moving forward when you have a $260 million quarterback. That's just reality. That's not an excuse, but it's part of the conversation. You look at all the free agents they have. You look at Philadelphia. Think about how highly regarded the Eagles were. I mean, they lost by a gnat's eyelash to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl last February. I mean, it was that close, right? A holding call, a defensive holding, pass interference, whatever it was. And what was the sentiment at that point in time? This team's set up so well. then they lose their offensive coordinator. They lose their defensive coordinator. Some of their veterans on defense got old overnight over the course of this season. Their quarterback, who looked like, other than Mahomes, best in the league last year, doesn't look like the same guy this year. And I think coaching is a part of that. I do wonder about health as well. Point is that the Eagles on paper look like they were set up to be fine and to win a couple Super Bowls over the next 4 or 5 years. And now just a year later, we're talking about the future of the head coach. Their coordinator situation's been a mess with either replacement. It hasn't really worked out very well.
By the way, when Bieniemy left Kansas City, that's messed with them too.
Sure. Yeah, I'll hear that. I mean, that whole debate about who called plays and, is it Andy Reid or Eric Bieniemy? The point was that was a collaborative operation, right? He clearly had
a very
exactly.
Right.
So anytime you're changing variables, you run the risk of something becoming lesser, something that dissipates, something that is, regresses, however you want to describe it. And when you are in that position, teams are gunning for you, and teams are trying to figure things out. That's one reason why Greg Roman, after a while, it ran its course, right? I mean, I think, I'll never subscribe to the idea that Greg Roman was their only problem whatsoever. But I think it was clear that it was time for this offense to evolve. It was time for someone else to work with Lamar Jackson. And Lamar Jackson needed to stay healthy. And that's a big part of it too, compared to the last couple of years. But the point is, for this team, I'm not sure it's going to set up any better for them at any point here in the future. The next 3-4 years, it's not going to set up any better than it is right now. Now, that doesn't mean they can't win. If they lose in the AFC Championship, that doesn't mean they can't come back next year and have a redemption story. But chances are they might not be the number 1 seed. They might be a wild card. By
the way, that redemption story will go back to being negative Nestor. Lamar can't win, which is, you think you're going to go into the playoffs and play a home game and then go to Buffalo and then go to Kansas City and win? I tell you what, Kansas City's trying to do that right now, right? Kansas City is trying to, we swatted away Miami in a 5 below night. Now they've got to go to Buffalo. And if they survive that, they've got to come here. And I tell you what, if Kansas City's out in Vegas, you won't be out there. You'll be with me to eat crab cakes and have some crab soup, like a good Maryland boy you should be, even though you're Pennsylvanian, sort of, kind of. I would say if Kansas City does that, man, you doff your cap. If they're in here next Sunday night at 7 o'clock and Patrick Mahomes is going to another Super Bowl in a visiting jersey in our stadium, they did something to go on the road and do that, because that's really hard to do. And Joe Flacco will, I know he's no good and he stinks and he threw picks and he's old and he did it. I watched it. I was there. I watched him go out to Denver. I watched him go up to New England, beat Peyton Manning, beat Tom Brady, beat 2 Hall of Famers on the road. It's hard to do. Really hard to do. Hard enough to win from home. This team's going to find out the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I mean, you say the same thing about Josh Allen. Even if they're playing in Buffalo, if they finally take down Kansas City in January, which is something they've been trying to do and have been unsuccessful, and then they go on the road and beat the Ravens, and be a great story. But it'll be a great story for Lamar Jackson. Even if they're playing at home, at this point in time, and again, they've got to take care of Houston first. We understand that, right? I mean, we don't need to keep saying that like we're players. You and I are not playing on Saturday, so we can look ahead. But if it's Lamar Jackson, even if it's at home, you're finally taking down Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen. In the case of Mahomes, you haven't even played him in January, but the Ravens, they've been in everyone's way in the AFC ever since Tom Brady walked out and went to Tampa Bay. It's been Kansas City. I mean, that's just where it is.
I've already said that's the heavyweight fight. I mean, we all think we're just going to win. We're 10. Okay, great. We're going to win. We're going to sit around Saturday night, eat popcorn, get ready, party, woohoo, getting ready. Boy, Sunday night's going to be slobber knocker.
And if you're a Ravens fan, if you're John Harbaugh, if you're Lamar Jackson, you're hoping that game is a slobber knocker, to your point, and it goes into overtime.
I hope it goes to penalty
and maybe
kicks.
Double overtime. Yeah, so I mean, that's where it is. So I mean, the Ravens are at the advantage here, playing at home, and also, and this is where we come back to it. As much as we kind of talk about all these different paths that these teams have, whether you're a wild card, playing on the road the entire time, as the Ravens frequently did in the first half of the Joe Flacco era, as they have for most of their history. I mean, let's face it. You think about Ravens playoff success, it's been on the road. I mean, that's their story. Some of their biggest disappointments have been their home playoff games.
There have been hurt feelings at home, bro.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So
never won a home playoff game that matters, Colts game, but not like, we haven't walked out of there thinking we're going to the Super Bowl. And I think we've all, to your point, we've done a lot of things around here. That's one thing. In your case, you haven't seen the Orioles win, as I look at World Series press pins from time to time. Just getting through this game, your whole pinch me moment would happen at 7:00 if you're in the winning locker room this week, just knowing they're going to host an AFC Championship game next week. That unto itself would be a big accomplishment, a big achievement, no matter who comes in here in red or blue next week.
I mean, it would be special. And we talked about this a couple weeks ago. I mean, it's the best thing you can do in your own stadium, knowing that, okay, not talking about like the Rams winning a Super Bowl in their home stadium, but in terms of just like the regular setup of a run-of-the-mill team in the NFL, the best you can do is to host a conference championship game and win a conference championship game in your own building. Again, acknowledging the Super Bowl scenario for some select teams, but for Baltimore, I mean, how special would that be? I mean, that's something, again, hasn't happened in 53 years. Think about what's happened. I mean, that was another franchise ago, right? Not just generations. It was another team ago as it pertains to Baltimore hosting that game. So there's definitely a really special element to what the Ravens are playing for that goes beyond just this season and the excitement of this team and trying to win a Super Bowl for the first time in 11 years, and Lamar Jackson trying to win his first Super Bowl. So there's a lot on the line on Saturday. There's no question about it. But to your point, assuming they do take care of business, and I expect them to, I think, I fully expect them to take care of business and win on Saturday. Then put your feet up, but be ready because you're going to have the winner of that game, Kansas City and Buffalo. They're going to be that's a team that's going to be very weathered in terms of, they've gone through something. They've really gone through something. So, we'll see how it plays out, but shaping up to be a really fun couple weeks here. The Ravens just have to take care of business, and it's going to be a really fun couple weekends here in Baltimore. And I already said it, and I'll continue to say it, especially assuming the Ravens do win Saturday, that the idea of a conference championship, an AFC championship in Baltimore, it's another one of those bucket list items that I think a lot of fans, even talking to one of my best buddies who went to the Super Bowl in New Orleans and has been to so many playoff games. We talked about it on New Year's, in fact, and he said that, that would be different. That would be special. Doing that in your home stadium, having that opportunity to raise the Lamar Hunt trophy and know that you're going to the Super Bowl. Even though the Ravens have done it, they've done it on the road. To do that at home, that would be really special. So this is a really unique opportunity that we'll continue to say doesn't come around every year. So this is a chance to do something really special that they haven't done before. So it's going to be a lot of fun on Saturday, and you hope even more fun the following Sunday.
We're going to be doing something really special the week of February 5th. It's going to be Cup of Soup or Bowl week. All brought to you by the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with our friends at Window Nation and Jiffy Lube. I'll be giving away Raven scratch-offs, Maryland's Lottery scratch-offs, not Raven scratch-offs, Snap scratch-offs. I also have some peppermint payouts, but I'll have some fresh ones as well. We will be doing a week of live broadcasts to benefit the Maryland Food Bank. I'm going to have a whole bunch of details about this coming forward. Just a little teaser. Big appreciation to all of our sponsors and bringing this thing together that week. So beginning the week of February 5th, you come out, say hello, have a cup or a bowl of Maryland crab soup or cream of crab soup. I did have a request for chicken noodle over the weekend, so I'm going to be working on that. Mark Bradinsky, the Blade, wanted chicken noodle soup, so I'm like, all right. That's good for the soul, from what I understand. Ravens football all week long around here. We're going to be talking with lots and lots of experts, lots of football people. Luke's going to be out in Owings Mills. If there's any breaking news, you'll get it first on the WNST text service. I remind everybody to stay warm out there this week. We will have a whole theme about warmth and hunger and abundance and all that stuff coming up in the month of February as the Ravens try to bring back a third Lombardi trophy, and the first one for Lamar Jackson, who who guaranteed us a Super Bowl, just like Joe Namath. We'll see. They are 2 hours of football away from playing in Super Bowl 58 in Las Vegas. I am Nestor. He's Luke. We are WNST AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore positive.